Ivanka Trump has come out of hiding, and what she said, including the one word she used to describe what it was like to work in her father's White House, likely explains why she left Donald Trump's swampy political machine, and I have the breaking story for you next. After Trump's first term, Ivanka became mostly a private person. Meanwhile, Daddy Dearest found another gear for his derangement. While her brother supported her father's madness, she was a ghost on the campaign trail, as if to say, you boys have fun with those toxic things boys do. But she surfaced recently on something called The Skinny Confidential, a show that is better known for saying things like hydrate, plump, and smooth your skin than hosting deep discussions on society and politics. But Ivanka did utter some gems about her days in Donald's White House, including one word that many of his critics would use to describe him. I will share that with you in just a minute, but first have a listen as she touches on being born a Trump, being raised in a bubble, and pretty much admitting that she was grossly unqualified for a seat in Washington, D.C. as an advisor to the president.
There's always going to be some people that will say, well, because of who the parents were, who your dad or your mom was, they're going to say like that was easy or given or granted.
Yeah, and that's been true in every phase of my life, from real estate to fashion, and will always be true. And that's okay, because I can't prove them wrong. I don't know. Like, I am who I am. I'm proud of where I came from. I had certain tremendous advantages in my life.
Because I imagine that overnight, everything kind of changes. Where you always had the public kind of platform, but now it's a much different kind of platform.
Yeah, very different, extremely different. And it was also a very emotional time. So people were sort of processing the experience for the good and for the bad, and in very individual, unique, sometimes highly counterproductive ways. But there were issues that I never would have internalized and understood, people I never would have met. So I really think in retrospect, I was able to break free of a bubble that I didn't even know that I was in, of the sort of Upper East Side of New York. When my father was elected, I had no intention of serving. And he came to me and my husband, and he asked for us to go with him. And so I think he recognized that I had the ability to know what I didn't know.
As Ivanka was describing that she wasn't qualified for the role, I'm glad she mentioned her husband Jared, who was also a Nepo advisor to the president. And I'll give Chris Christie a few seconds to remind us of that criminal enterprise, and then I'll reveal Ivanka's very telling words about her father's first presidency.
The grift from this family is breathtaking. It's breathtaking. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Kushner walk out of the White House and months later get $2 billion from the Saudis. $2 billion from the Saudis. You think it's because he's some kind of investing genius? Or do you think it's because he was sitting next to the President of the United States for 4 years doing favors for the Saudis? That's your money. That's your money he stole and gave it to his family.
So with that kind of windfall, Ivanka has no worries and lots of time to talk about the good old White House days, right? But as the interview continued, they didn't sound so good. Have a listen as she shares what she was experiencing at the time. And when you hear her word choice, tell me if you don't think she's describing the man she was serving under.
I don't think I saw sunlight for 4 years. You know, there is a darkness to that world that I don't really want to welcome into mine. To some degree, I'm, at the center of the storm because my father is about to be president, but it's a very dark, negative business. And some people love like the gladiator aspect of it. The fight that was never me. And I'm really proud that I lived through a very emotional time where people were not their best selves. And I kept my North Star, and I didn't become something that I wasn't just because I was thrown into an arena that was different, the political arena that was different and people acted differently. There's this concept in Judaism called Lashon Hara, which is literally translated to evil speech.
Did you hear what I heard? That big word darkness, followed by dark negative business, the gladiator, the fight. Those are words that any sane person would use to describe Donald Trump. So I think the projection is obvious. How about you? So what's Ivanka's solution? How about a little exposure therapy?
Don't you think with what you've experienced too, there's some kind of exposure therapy where you've been exposed to so much that you almost have this muscle of resilience that you wouldn't have had if you didn't get exposed to that?
You become a little bit calloused, but I think it's for sure. If you're internalizing that as real, that's a recipe for disaster. I don't think there's longevity to that.
So there it is. The solution to living in a world ruled by Donald Trump is don't internalize it as real. Good advice, but easier said than done if you're sitting on a Saudi gift of $2 billion. But for the rest of us civilians, we may need a higher level of exposure therapy. And I will give the final word to the show's co-host. Watch as he extends the projection theme by going on a tone-deaf monologue about crazy people who scream and yell about negative things with zero self-awareness that he's describing Ivanka's former White House boss and your next president.
I think as a society, we gave way too much voice to people that were causing harm. Meaning, like, there was a lot of people that were screaming and yelling about a lot of negative things that we just paid way too much attention to. And I think people are now like, hey, if you walk around on the street as a normal person, you don't see these kind of people out in public. They exist in corners of the internet where for whatever reason we were paying way more attention than we should have. It's very rare that you meet some of these crazy people, call them lunatics actually, that are screaming and yelling about God knows what. And the problem is we were platforming those voices way too often.